December 1944. Imagine this, a seasoned German officer, cornered in a crumbling farmhouse on the edge of oblivion, stares down an entire American company advancing through the mud and mist. He knows the war is lost. Hitler's grand visions have crumbled into ruins across Europe. Yet, with a handful of weary soldiers at his side, he raises his voice not in fury, but in quiet defiance. We will hold. What drives a man to stand firm when the world around him is surrendering? This isn't just a tale of resistance, it's a window into the human spirit at war's ragged end, where choices echo far beyond the battlefield. Stick with me because what unfolds next reveals secrets of leadership, loyalty, and the unspoken codes that shaped the final days of World War II. Details that textbooks often overlook, but ones that could change how you see history forever. The Ardennes forest loomed like a frozen sentinel along the Belgian-German border, its dense pines heavy with snow and secrets. By late 1944, the Allied push into Nazi territory had transformed from a triumphant surge into a grueling slog. American forces, part of General Omar Bradley's 12th Army Group, were grinding through the Hurtgen Forest's aftermath, where earlier battles had claimed over 30,000 casualties in a meat grinder of mud, mines, and machine guns. The air was thick with the scent of pine resin mixed with gunpowder, and the ground was a patchwork of craters from artillery barrages that had uprooted ancient trees. Morale among the GIs was a fragile thing. Many were replacements, fresh from stateside training, thrust into a war that felt both endless and inevitably won. They had crossed the Rhine in places, liberated Paris months earlier, and now eyed the heart of the Reich. But victory wasn't clean. It came in fits and starts, village by village, often punctuated by pockets of fierce holdouts. Near the town of Prum, close to the Schnee-Eifel Ridge, a platoon from the 4th Infantry Division, veterans of Utah Beach and the Normandy breakout, stumbled upon one such pocket. The date was December 15th, just a day before Hitler's last desperate gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, would erupt nearby. But on this quiet sector, the front seemed almost dormant. Scouts reported a small German detachment holed up in a cluster of stone barns and a weathered mill, overlooking a vital crossroads. The buildings, dating back to the 18th century, had withstood sieges before, their thick walls pockmarked by recent shelling. No tanks, no heavy weapons visible. Just the faint glow of a lantern through shattered windows and the occasional cough echoing in the chill. Captain Elias Thompson, a 32-year-old from Ohio who had risen through the ranks since enlisting in 1941, halted his men at a safe distance. Thompson was no stranger to these encounters. He had seen the Wehrmacht's elite panzer divisions shatter in Normandy and watched SS units melt away in the Falaise pocket, where over 50,000 Germans were captured in August. But he also knew the dangers of complacency. "Eyes sharp," he whispered to his sergeant, a grizzled New Yorker named Rossi. This could be a trap or just the last gasp. Prisoners taken earlier that week had whispered about fragmented units, deserters slipping away at night, officers struggling to maintain discipline amid rumors of Allied atrocities and Soviet advances from the east. Yet, some commanders clung to their oaths, inspired by the Führer's broadcasts promising wonder weapons that never materialized. A reconnaissance team crept forward under cover of dusk, their M1 Garans at the ready. The lead scout, Private Harlan, a farm boy from Iowa, signaled all clear at first. Then, a sharp crack split the silence. A Mauser rifle shot, not aimed to kill but to warn, kicking up snow inches from his boot. The team dove for cover behind a fallen log. No barrage followed, no grenades, just that single, measured report. Back at the line, Thompson peered through his field glasses. There, in the doorway of the central barn, stood a figure. Tall, erect, in a greatcoat dusted with frost. Binoculars dangled from his neck, and a peaked cap shadowed his face. He wasn't young, lines etched his features, speaking of years on the Ostfront, where millions had perished in brutal winters against the Red Army. Interrogation of recent captives painted a fuller picture. The man was Colonel Heinrich Voss, a 48-year-old career soldier from Bavaria. He had fought in Poland in 1939, survived the siege of Leningrad, and earned the Iron Cross for holding a bridgehead against overwhelming Soviet tanks. Transferred west after wounds sidelined him briefly, Voss now commanded what remained of a battered infantry battalion, perhaps 20 men, low on ammo and hope. His orders from Berlin were obsolete: delay the enemy at all costs. But Voss wasn't a fanatic. Survivors described him as pragmatic, even paternal, sharing his rations and allowing the wounded to evacuate when possible. What set him apart was his unyielding sense of duty, rooted in the Prussian military tradition that valued honor above survival. Thompson decided on negotiation first. A German-American corporal, fluent from his immigrant parents, grabbed a megaphone salvaged from a jeep. "Achtung! You are encircled. Surrender now, and you will be treated fairly under international law. Food, medical aid, and safety await." The words carried across the clearing, amplified by the still air. Minutes ticked by. Then, Voss's voice replied, steady and resonant, like a professor addressing a class. "I am Colonel Voss of the Wehrmacht. My position is to be held. We will not yield without terms." No threats, no propaganda, just a declaration that hinted at deeper resolve. The Americans exchanged glances. Winter was biting hard, temperatures hovered near freezing, and supply lines stretched thin after the rapid advances post-D-Day. Fuel shortages meant no immediate armored support, and artillery was conserved for larger threats. Thompson radioed Battalion HQ, hostile force, small but determined. "Request guidance." The response crackled back, "Secure the crossroads. Minimize casualties. Use discretion." It was code for avoiding needless fights in a war winding down. Yet, leaving an armed group behind invited ambush, especially with intelligence reports of werewolf partisans, Nazi guerrillas sworn to harass occupiers. As night deepened, stars piercing the overcast sky, Thompson opted for patience. He sent a runner with a white flag, an unarmed lieutenant named Greer, who approached midway. "Colonel Voss," Greer called out in accented German, "your war is over. Think of your men. They deserve to live." Voss emerged fully, his breath visible in the cold. He didn't draw his Luger but stood with hands clasped behind his back. "Lieutenant," he replied courteously, "my men are free to choose. But I swore an oath. Retreat has cost us everything, from Warsaw to the Volga. Here, I stand." Greer pressed, "How many are with you? We can end this peacefully." Voss smiled faintly, revealing a glimpse of weariness. "Enough to matter. Give us time, 2 hours, to discuss." It was an unusual request, but one that spoke volumes. Back with Thompson, Greer relayed the exchange. The captain weighed it against the ticking clock. His own troops were ragged, some nursed frostbite, others dreamed of home after letters from families urging caution. "Granted," Thompson said finally. "But stay alert." The 2 hours crawled by. Fires were lit in sheltered spots, coffee brewed from K-rations. At the 90-minute mark, shadows stirred. A German private, barely 18, stumbled out with hands high, whispering, "Kamerad." He was followed by 3 more, then a sergeant clutching a bandaged arm. They spoke of Voss urging them to go. The fatherland needs builders, not martyrs. The Americans disarmed them gently, offering hot soup and cigarettes. Medical checks revealed malnutrition, rations had been scraps for weeks. As the deadline neared, Voss remained visible, pacing slowly. Thompson signaled the advance, a flanking maneuver with bar teams providing cover fire. The assault was precise, suppressive bursts pinning down windows, grenades lobbed to flush out defenders without wholesale destruction. Return fire sputtered, a few rounds pinged off helmets, but no hits. Within 20 minutes, the barns fell silent. Smoke curled from a hayloft, but the structures stood. Inside, Voss sat at a rough-hewn table, his cap removed, revealing graying hair. His sidearm was empty on the floor. He rose as Americans entered, saluting crisply. Through the interpreter, Thompson asked, "Why prolong it? You could have saved lives." Voss met his gaze. "Duty isn't blind, Captain. It's a measure of character. My men saw that surrender comes with respect earned, not begged." Thompson nodded, recognizing echoes of his own code. The colonel was escorted out without chains, offered a seat by a warming fire. Later interrogations uncovered more. Voss had studied history at Heidelberg, lost brothers in World War I, and quietly sabotaged extreme orders to protect civilians. That encounter, minor in the grand tapestry of World War II, highlighted the war's twilight humanity. As Allied forces closed in, such moments multiplied. Over 1.5 million Germans surrendered in the West by May 1945, often with dignity preserved. It reminded soldiers on both sides that enemies were men first, bound by shared trials. The Major, Colonel Heinrich Voss, did not resist as the Americans led him out into the yard. His greatcoat hung heavy with damp snow, but he walked with the same measured stride he had maintained for years on parade grounds and battlefields alike. The lieutenant, Captain Thompson, motioned for his men to ease back. No rough hands grabbed the colonel's arms, no one shoved him toward the waiting trucks. Instead, a private offered a canteen of hot coffee, black and bitter from the field stove. Voss accepted it with a small nod, the steam rising between them like a fragile truce. What followed was not the chaos of capture that many had feared. The remaining Germans, 8 in total, including 2 wounded, were brought out one by one. Medics moved among them without hesitation, bandaging frostbitten fingers and checking for shrapnel wounds. Blankets were draped over shoulders, cigarettes passed around. The Americans spoke little German, the Germans little English, but gestures and shared exhaustion bridged the gap. One GI, a corporal from Brooklyn, noticed Voss's boots were cracked and leaking. Without a word, he pulled a spare pair of dry socks from his pack and handed them over. Voss hesitated, then slipped them on, the simple act carrying more weight than any formal surrender. As the prisoners were processed, intelligence officers arrived from battalion headquarters. They questioned Voss quietly in a nearby barn converted into a temporary command post. The colonel answered truthfully, without evasion. He described the disintegration of his unit over the past months, the endless retreats from the Dnieper to the Vistula, the letters from home that spoke of bombed cities and starving families, the growing realization that the promises from Berlin were hollow. He admitted he had ordered his men to destroy only military equipment, sparing civilian homes when possible. He had refused to execute captured partisans, citing the laws of war he still believed in. When asked why he had held the farm so stubbornly, Voss spoke softly, "I could not walk away again. Not without showing my men that honor has a price, but also a limit. When the moment came, I let them choose. Most chose life." Thompson listened from the doorway, arms folded. He had lost friends in Normandy, seen villages burned, watched men break under the strain. Yet here was an enemy officer who had fought fiercely, then surrendered with dignity preserved. The captain felt no hatred, only a strange recognition. War had stripped them both to the same essentials: cold, fatigue, and the need to believe something larger than survival. By dawn, the prisoners were loaded onto trucks bound for a collection point near Bastogne. Voss was placed in the cab of the lead vehicle, seated beside a young American driver who offered him half a chocolate bar from his ration. The colonel broke it carefully, sharing the piece with the driver. As the convoy rolled out, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the tracks of the brief fight. Word of the encounter spread quietly through the 4th Infantry Division. Men who had expected another bloody scrap instead spoke of the German who refused to beg, yet accepted mercy when it was offered with respect. Some called it foolish pride, others saw it as quiet courage. A few wrote home about it in letters censored for details, describing not the victory, but the strange calm that settled over the farm when the shooting stopped. In the larger story of December 1944, this incident was a footnote. The next day, the Ardennes counteroffensive exploded, tens of thousands of German troops pouring through the fog, catching American lines off guard. The Battle of the Bulge would claim over 80,000 American casualties and delay the Allied advance for weeks. Yet even amid that chaos, pockets of humanity persisted. Soldiers on both sides, exhausted by years of war, sometimes chose restraint over destruction when the chance arose. Voss himself survived the war. Transferred to a POW camp in France, then later to one in the United States, he worked on farms in the Midwest during his internment. He learned English, read American newspapers, and listened to radio broadcasts of the Nuremberg trials. Released in 1947, he returned to a divided Germany, where he lived quietly until his death in 1972. He never wrote memoirs, never sought recognition. But those who had been there, American and German alike, remembered him as the officer who stood until standing no longer served a purpose, then stepped aside with his head high. Stories like this rarely make the history books. They are too small, too personal, overshadowed by the grand strategies and massive battles. Yet they reveal something essential about the end of wars, that even in the final moments, when ideologies have collapsed and victory is certain, the way men treat one another can still matter. It can remind us that beneath uniforms and flags, soldiers are human beings, capable of cruelty, yes, but also of decency, restraint, and unexpected grace. In the snow-covered yard of that forgotten farm, two armies briefly met, not as conquerors and conquered, but as men who had seen enough death to value life. And in that quiet exchange, of coffee, socks, and shared silence, they proved that even the bitterest conflicts can end with something resembling honor. If moments like these resonate with you, if you believe the human side of history deserves to be remembered, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support helps bring these overlooked stories to light, ensuring they aren't lost in the shadow of larger events. Thank you for watching.